Senator.
Thank you very much. Well, I now call upon representatives from the Australian Research Council. Professor Thomas, would you like to make an opening statement?
Professor Sue Thomas, CEO. No, I don't. Thank you.
Excellent. We will kick off the questioning, and I'm looking at Senator Carr.
Thank you very much, and good evening.
Good evening.
Look, I was just wondering, how important is the PGPA Act in terms of your work? What's the thesis of the operations of that act? The full title is the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Act.
Thank you, Senator. As I understand the Act, it outlines in broad terms our responsibilities as Commonwealth officials managing Commonwealth money.
Yes. And the accountability requirements that go with the spending of money, isn't it? And accompany that matter, of course, goes to sometimes there's a specific rule within the ARC guidelines, is there not, that goes for going to matters of Commonwealth grant rules and guidelines. Is that the case?
So, Senator, ARC does follow Commonwealth grant guidelines, yes. And we have, as I know you're aware, quite rigorous eligibility requirements.
Of course you do. I've had this opportunity to have a look over your annual reports, and given that there's a requirement under Section 19 of the PGPA Act for you to notify the Finance Minister if there's any problems with any of your grants, that's the case, isn't there?
I may defer to my colleague who is more experienced in the details of this, Senator.
Kylie Emery, Branch Manager, Policy and Strategy Branch. Senator, I don't have a copy of the Act with me, so...
Well, maybe you have to take my word for it, but it's a duty to keep responsible ministers and Finance Minister informed. Section 19 states the accountability authority of a Commonwealth entity must do the following. It goes through this normal provisions for any Commonwealth agency, you would agree, and of course your annual report must detail if there's any non-compliance with the financial law. That would be equally the case, of course, on all Commonwealth agencies, and you're no different in that regard. So I've taken the opportunity to go through your annual report, and I can't see that there's been any notifications. I'm not surprised by that, because I'm sure this agency would ensure that all the grants are administered properly in accordance with the law. Now, I also had the opportunity to go back over the Australian Research Council's administration of the National Competitive Grants Program, which is the other part of the arrangements, and that was the Auditor General's report from last year, 1st of August 2019. You're familiar with that report?
Yes, Senator.
And would you say that it's a report that gives you a clean bill of health?
It was a very positive report.
Yes,
Thank you,
a very
Senator.
positive report. In fact, I might spend a little time on it because, and you'll see method in my madness in a moment, so don't be too surprised. You see, it says here that the ARC has a mature and effective process in place to assess grants, manage conflicts of interest, and provide funding recommendations that comply with the National Competitive Grants Program guidelines. That's page 8. It says there that the ARC arrangement to measure the performance of the grants, monitor evaluation of the program, provide assurances that administering organisations comply with the funding requirements are largely effective. The ARC has established appropriate arrangements to manage crucial and perceived conflicts of interest. The ARC provided the Minister for Education clear advice and funding recommendations consistent with the requirement of the ARC Act, the CGRGs and the NCGP guidelines, all of which is from page 8 for the Hansard record if need be, and I'm only happy to table this if required. But I don't think I am, because no one's disputing that this is what the Auditor General found in your case. It went on to say that you've completed risk assessment for all guidelines developed for grant commencing 2016, 17, 18, 19 and 20. which is pretty interesting given the report was dated 19, but nonetheless that's what it says. And it says here, assessing each of the guidelines as low risk, the ARC has also sought received confirmation each round from the Department of Finance and the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet that the assessment of a low risk was appropriate. You'd agree with all of that, I presume?
I believe so, Senator.
You're not disputing any of these assertions?
Senator.
Right?
Sounds familiar, Senator.
It's all very good, and so on and so forth. You see, the analysis of funding and underfunding grants found that all cases assessors, both general and detailed, were assigned in accordance with the requirements, and written assessments were completed with a range of recording against proposals on the various scales that we all appreciate, those of us that have had some interest in this area. You know, that scale of of A through to E in terms of the way in which that's all done properly. The ARC advised that where inappropriate assessments are confirmed, the ARC may request an assessor to amend the assessment or, in rare circumstances, remove the assessment from the peer review process, all of which you'd agree with. You had no particular problem with any of these things?
No, Senator.
All right. And the Public Governance, Performance and Accountability 2013, the PGPA Act, provides the basis for the Commonwealth Performance Framework. The framework consists of the PGPA Act, the accompanying Public Governance, Performance and Accountability Rule 2014 and guidance issued by the Department of Finance. And an important element of the framework is a clear alignment of the purposes and the planning outcomes of the entity, and the performance information provided by the entity provides the Parliament, the public, with information to assess the entity's progress towards achieving their goals. Once again, clean bill of health. And that's quoting from page 44. That's on the question of performance and reporting. There's only one matter I seek your advice from. It says here that there were 11 matters from the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2019. The ARC was monitoring 11 matters carried over from the previous quarter in regard to research integrity. And as such, the 20 research integrity matters new and ongoing. Considering the period, 13 matters remain active as of the 31st of March. I'll ask you to take on notice what they were.
Yes, Senator.
Now, the reason I raise all that with you is that on the basis of these public documents that you have released about yourselves, and which have been independently verified by the Auditor General and the Finance Department, suggesting that you're in compliance with the administration of the National Competitive Grants Program rules and the competitive grant and guidelines in regard to the administration of the grants. So in that case, I'm wondering why you've chosen to write to the DVCs of research asking for detailed information about a number of grants which were in fact acquitted and which you have not notified, from what I can tell by the public record, you've not notified the Auditor General or the Department of Finance of any difficulties or any breaches of the various acts and guidelines when the grants were acquitted. Now, some of the references that I've got here go back to grants whose completion dates, I can list them if you like, but 2017, 2018, 2015, 2018, 2016, 2017, 2017, 2017. These are grants of some long standing. Why is it that you're writing to DVC's research in September, no, beginning on the 25th of August, and in September and other times, seeking further advice on grants that have been acquitted and not found to be wanting in any respect?
Senator, thank you for the question. The ARC has a standard process where it will follow up with institutions where any sort of allegation has been made against a researcher who has received ARC funding that's in the public domain. And we don't attest to the truthfulness or otherwise of that allegation, but we follow up with the institution because it's a piece of information that's out there, and we want to understand the university's natural justice response when we raise that sensitivity with them. So there's no advice necessarily because we are following up on an allegation.
So an allegation has to be made in public about a distinguished scholar, and you investigate it, do you?
We contact the university. Senator, as I said, we don't attest to the truthfulness or otherwise, but if the allegations are untrue, they impugn researchers and
certainly do
undermine
that.
public confidence. If they are true, they highlight a variety of issues that we want to be alert to.
Professor Thomas, is it your view that you're gathering this information with a view to you making a public statement in defence of the scholars?
Senator, our remit is about ARC grants. We want to understand,
Yes, you're sure,
even
that's
with
true.
past grants,
Sure.
whether they have been acquitted in accordance with the contracts under which they were issued.
Have you found that any grants that have been referred to, and we are talking here about a series of scurrilous articles in the Australian and the Telegraph attacking some of our leading scholars, have you found any of those grants that have not been acquitted in accordance with your obligations to the Auditor General, to the Department of Finance, in terms of your requirements, as I've outlined this evening?
I might defer to my colleague on this one, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Kathy Dent, Chief Program Officer. In relation to those letters and articles that you're referring to, we are following up with the institutions. We are reviewing the responses that the institutions have provided, and we're reviewing them against the requirements of our grant agreements with the institutions.
Thank you. Now, I want to know is that why, when you acquitted these grants, for instance, those grants that I've referred to, for instance, from the University of New South Wales back in 2017 or 2016, they have already been acquitted. You are required under your own legislation to ensure that the contracts have been fulfilled, and if they haven't been, you're obliged to take certain actions. I take it no action's been taken in any of these grants. Is that the case?
As my colleague has said, this is, some of these matters are still ongoing.
That's not... These are grants that are acquitted 3 and 4 and 5 years ago.
So,
Did you take action at the time?
Senator, at the time, we would have taken action if we were alert to any
Thank you.
particular sensitivities.
Have you been alert to any action that would require you to challenge those contracts?
I think that process is still ongoing.
No.
Senator.
You have already acquitted them. In 2015, you acquitted grants. In 2016, you acquitted grants. In 2017, you acquitted grants. And you have advised the Auditor General that everything was above board.
And Senator, certainly in all respects of the administration and our back and forth, that was the case. In these cases, there are new sensitivities that come to light that may not have been apparent at the time, and we simply are contacting institutions to make sure we have a comment on anything new that comes up.
So one of the new sensitivities was directed, for instance, at Professor Edward Holmes in an article published in the Telegraph back on the 11th of May. Now, Professor Holmes is a laureate fellow. Was there any problem with his laureate?
Not that I'm aware
No.
of, Senator.
He's just been made New South Wales Scientist of the Year. But according to the Murdoch press, he's some sort of stooge for the Chinese government. Did you take any action in regard to this report on the 11th of May?
That I couldn't say.
I think we wouldn't comment on specific cases,
Oh, no, of course you
Senator.
won't. But because he's been subject to death threats, his team have been subject to rape threats, and what have you done about it?
Senator, we want to provide public assurance that there is an integrity in the research system. Like you, we don't want false accusations levelled at researchers.
Yes, indeed you. Of course you do not want to have false
So we will follow up
accusations.
to understand.
But I'm saying if this was made back in May, these allegations, These allegations patently untrue. And I want to know what you've done about it.
Senator, in each case we will follow up with an institution. We can't comment on details of individual cases, but we do have a
Mr. Chairman,
standard
I'd
process.
like to table a letter here from the Chief Program Officer from the ARC, if I might do that. Just pass those on for me. I need to make sure the officers get to see it. This one, mate. Is there enough to go around? And we need to put it on the thing.
I don't have a problem with that.
Sorry, that's for you. I've got one here. It's just- Could you confirm, Ms. Thomas, that that's an IRC letter that's been sent out?
Certainly appears to be, written by my colleague.
Yeah. Well, can you confirm that letter?
It does appear to be a redacted version of a letter.
It is a
that I've
redacted
sent.
version. I don't want to name the professor that's been sent to or the university. And it says there that you've come to our attention that Professor X, named as a participant on an application at X University, is a high-risk institution. Because, on what basis? The Australian Strategic Policy Institute, China Defence University Tracker website says so. Is that the basis on which you make this assertion?
Senator, we scan for public sensitivities. We do not attest to their truthfulness or otherwise, but we enable a natural justice response from universities.
Natural justice. This is natural justice, is it? Now, you've asked them what due diligence were undertaken by your organisation to judge the security risks of the proposed research outline in the applications. What due diligence activity was undertaken by the organisation in relation to Professor X's affiliation with an overseas university? What arrangements are in place to protect the IP generated? Now, surely you would have checked all that when you acquitted these grants.
I'd like to correct you, please, Senator. This is in relation to an application, not an ARC-funded grant.
Well, an application. The
So
principle remains the same.
We
You
are-
would have confirmed all of these matters. Well, let me put it to you another way. You've changed the conflict of interest and confidentiality policy on about the 8th of September, have you not?
Yes, Senator.
On what basis did you do that?
To enable an increased range of declarations from researchers who are applying to ARC funding.
And what were you seeking in particular?
There is a specific set of declarations, mostly about their foreign links.
Foreign connections.
Yes, Senator.
I see. And the purpose of that was to?
To increase transparency around potential, perceived interests that people have, to enable universities to have a look at that when they're making applications.
And so, and you've relied upon what? The ASPI's tracker.
Senator, we scan a range of sites, and that is simply one.
One. Who advised you to use the tracker as a tool to determine due diligence?
Senator, we're not a security agency and we are not using the tracker as a tool.
Sorry? You have referred to this in all the correspondence.
Senator, we've been trying to grow an understanding of what sensitivities represent risks. And the point we're at the moment is when we identify sensitivities of a range of different types, whether or not people think they are valid, we seek assurance from universities that any risk perceived in that sensitivity is being managed.
But Professor Thomas, You would have done that at the time of the acquittal.
Certainly, we have followed our process as rigorously as ANAO has said.
Yes.
This is simply following up on anything new that has
So
come
you
to
go back
light.
5 years, and then because someone down the road here at a foreign-funded research project, $140,000 to fund that project, because someone puts it out and puts some scurrilous material in a Murdoch newspaper, you decide that you're now going to run this jihad against some of our most prominent scholars.
Senator, we want everyone to have confidence in the
Confidence.
research system.
Yeah, we'd have confidence in you. Surely that's part of it as well.
Well, Senator Carr, I think that's unreasonable, and
Well,
I
well,
think it is unreasonable. I think that ARC is entitled to due diligence on how it spends taxpayer
well, I'd ask you
funds.
this, Professor Summers, when you look at the ASPE report, have you noticed the disclaimer on it?
I don't have anything in front of me, Senator.
Well, what it does say is, and perhaps I should table that as well if I get a copy of that. No person should rely on the contents of this publication without first obtaining advice from a qualified professional. Now, apart from the Murdoch press, surely no person should rely upon the content of this publication without obtaining advice from a qualified professional. Surely you're qualified professionals?
Senator, I said we don't attest to the truthfulness of or otherwise of sensitivities we find, but we put that to universities to seek their assurance.
So, just refresh my memory. How many notifications have there been of breaches of the Defence Export Control Act?
Zero that I'm aware of.
Zero. 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 Surely that would be a professional body that you could rely upon. Not this type of nonsense. So what consultations did you undertake before you revised the policy to rely on documents such as this?
So, Senator, we've been in conversation for some time now with the Foreign Interference Task Force Coordinator's Office, and we implemented changes to our due diligence policy as a result of those discussions and to increase transparency as a means of mitigating any perception of influence.
And what's the response been from the universities?
It's a fairly recent implementation, so I wouldn't say we've heard from them all.
Oh, no, see. Well, what about the peak organisations? How are they going with it?
So, Senator, we spoke with the peak organisations just prior to implementing this change of policy.
Sure. So the group of 8, what do they think of it?
I think you need to ask the group of 8 what they think of it.
Oh, no, I think I'm asking you.
Well, we had a broad discussion around what the planned or proposed changes were, and I don't think I could say what their views were, Senator.
You don't think you could say? You've got
Well,
no correspondence to call
I
on?
wouldn't like to respond on their behalf, Senator.
Sorry?
I wouldn't like to respond on their behalf.
Well, are you prepared to table the correspondence from the group of 8? You're prepared to table your correspondence so we make sure we get the full picture and their correspondence?
So, Senator, we had a face-to-face or a video conference
sure.
discussion.
Yes, but what about the correspondence? Is there any correspondence between yourselves, the ARC, and the group of 8?
Yes, there is.
Yes.
I would need to take advice on that to understand what we could provide you with.
Well, I'd ask you to table all of that correspondence in regard to the changes that you're proposing as of the material following, to be precise about this, following, let's say, the day after these documents were published by The Australian. So that was the 24th, wasn't it? That's when you first wrote back, isn't it?
Senator, I'm happy that we take this on notice, and I'll take
I just want to
advice
be clear that we're
on
not,
what I can provide.
I don't want you to be confused as to what I'm asking for, right? Or to be any misunderstanding equally as to the nature of this request to you. And so it can't be argued that this is commercial in confidence or a breach of privacy or anything, because it goes to the policy settings and the responses of our major universities, which you might recall have something close on 70% of the grants. Is that right?
It sounds about right.
Yeah,
Senator.
that's about right.
Senator Carr, just how long in this current line of questioning do you have? And I know you'll say
Quite a while, yeah.
night.
Quite a while. I did indicate to you it would take some time, but
That's
if
okay.
someone else wants to have a
I-
go, I've got plenty of time tonight, right? And plenty of material as well.
Well, I think I'll just give the call to Senator O'Sullivan just to something.
Is there any reason why I can't have that correspondence tonight?
I will need to take advice, Senator.
We don't have it with us, Senator.
We
Don't have with you.
No.
So tell me this, the IT system at the ARC, does it prevent you from transferring documents to Parliament House, or is it
Senator, I
broken
think we
down?
went through that at the March estimates, and it had proved difficult for us to...
Yes, I know, that's
find
because you couldn't
documents.
find a letter when there was last time I asked your inquiries.
Yes, Senator, we've taken on notice, and we will...
I just wonder why you can't provide it tonight.
Well, Senator, I think they've taken it on notice.
Speaking of confusion, just so that maybe those that are following on at home, I'll ask this question just to put on the record. I mean, just having a look at the questions that you actually asked in your letter that the Senator has tabled, this so-called jihad that Senator Carr refers to. These are the questions. What due diligence activities were undertaken by your organisation to judge the security risks of the proposed research outlined in the application, and what risk level was determined? Second question. What due diligence activities have been undertaken by your organisation in relation to the professor's affiliation with the said university? And the third question is, what arrangements are in place to protect the IP generated from this research project to ensure that the benefit of this research remains in Australia? Now, that's hardly a jihad. I would have thought it's a bit of accountability, and maybe at the strongest possible term I could think of was maybe a please explain. And that would be about it, I would have thought. Can you give us a response, please?
That's the intent, to understand what universities have in place because a sensitivity has been detected, whether or not that sensitivity represents a truth.
And I just would reiterate, Senator, this is in relation to applications for funding. They aren't in relation to grants that have already been provided.
And how does that differ from the current arrangements that are in place for the conflict of interest to be managed at each and every institution of the country and by the ARC itself?
Let's look at the call, Chair.
Sorry, I just thought I'd help you out with completion of the actual question.
The essence of team spirit is fantastic. Senator Dave, I think, has a question, and then we'll be back to you shortly, Senator Carr.
So the last question on that letter about IP, to me, is really important, because I think in the past we've had a lot of really good work done by Australian universities, Australian researchers, that have then the IP has gone overseas, so those that reap the benefit of the work that has been conducted in Australia are overseas enterprises.
But that'd be a breach of the current regulations.
Senator Carr,
I want to
please.
understand the purpose of that final question regarding IP. Is that to protect Australian interests, Australian businesses and Australian industry? Because, sorry, with all due respect, Senator Carr, we have seen time and time again work done in Australia that has been developed and then the IP suddenly resides
not
overseas.
the
And
ARC
I'm not,
funded
I am
grants.
not pointing the finger at any single nation. It has happened
but
time and time again with different nations.
If everybody could just...
I'd just like to understand, and will that final question help us to ensure that whatever contract we enter into with an overseas institution ensures that we retain the IP that is developed onshore.
Senator, at this point I differentiate between two slightly different situations. Most ARC funding awarded goes to groups who do have some international collaboration.
Yep.
And so co-discovery may occur in a project, and then it may be entirely appropriate that IP coming out of the project is shared between creators in Australia and beyond. The intent of this question is to understand that IP arrangements are thought of early and that the administering institution has an IP policy that complies with the national principles of intellectual property management for publicly funded research, which have clauses in them about gaining benefit for Australia.
So it's just reassuring us that the existing requirements of IP are actually being thought of when entering into a new agreement.
Yes, that's clear, Senator.
Thank you.
Now, with regards to the people that were mentioned in these articles, I mean, isn't this just an opportunity to actually, I mean, if there is no problem with answering these questions and they can give solid answers that satisfy the ARC, that would actually be of benefit in terms of enabling them to rebut what's been claimed of them, wouldn't it?
We believe increased transparency is a positive thing, and my colleague may wish to add more.
Senator, so just to clarify, these questions are on applications. Some of the other questions some of the issues in relation to the articles are in relation to grants that have already been given. And the purpose of the questioning is to ensure that they have met their obligations under the grant agreement, and that it remains a requirement on the ARC under the PGPA Act to ensure that they have an ongoing role in ensuring the proper expenditure of Commonwealth funds.
And how is that different from the present arrangement?
Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure I understand.
How is it different from the present arrangements?
I'm sorry, Senator, how is what different?
Your proposed changes to the conflict of interest, how are they materially different from the present arrangements?
So this is really about making clear, Senator, that we are asking questions around whether there has been foreign support or for research activities, whether there has been
Sure.
affiliations on that kind of information.
Have you finished your questions? Because I'll go back if it's not.
Yep,
If
Senator Carr.
that's it. Right, thank you.
Back to you.
Now, look, just to be clear about this, the ASC, you understand you've had some feedback from the group of 8, and that's been pretty strong, hasn't it?
Certainly we have been in correspondence with them, yes.
And it's pretty strongly worded correspondence, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. What's their concern?
Senator, certainly without going into the details, one of the issues that has been raised is the veracity of the information that has been used to detect sensitivities.
That's right. Particularly the tracker.
Yes.
Isn't that the case?
Yes.
And what is the issue in regard to the veracity of the tracker?
Senator, I guess, how would I say it? Universities feel that it's not a good source of information.
They certainly do. That's somewhat of an understatement. I mean, there have been occasions where the institute has actually got the wrong university, got the wrong person, got the wrong country. Is that true or not?
There was one instance and it was clarified.
Well, can you clarify what that instance is?
Not off the top of my head, Senator,
Well, it's
no.
to do with Taiwan, wasn't it?
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah. And this is the matter in regard to the Professor Wee Long Chen, Professor and Director of Research and Chemical Engineering at Monash University. Is that the case?
I can't remember the details of who it was about, Senator, and we would prefer not to comment on individuals.
The point is he's been commented upon. He's been pilloried across the country. You've put out, on the basis of this, this material, statements to these universities the day after this article appears. That's the case, isn't it?
It was fairly soon after.
The day after. This material is not always correct even in specific detail of having the wrong university, the wrong person in the wrong country. You're saying that that's the basis on which you then seek these questions, which I presume you would have covered off in the current guidelines and procedures of the conflict of interest, which have been in place for how long now?
Best part of a decade.
A decade, which the Auditor General says are in a ridgy ditch, are in very good shape. Would you agree?
Yes.
And you feel the need to act on them now because of this nonsense that's coming out of ASPE?
Senator,
That's the nature of the complaint, is it not?
Senator, if I can add, the ARC has an obligation when it becomes aware of allegations in relation to researchers or research which has been funded by the ARC to undertake due diligence in relation to those allegations. That is regardless of whether it is a current grant or a past grant. That is the practice across all of the types of allegations. When we raise them with the institution, it is the institution's then opportunity to correct the record.
Sure. There's no statute of limitation on your acquittal processes. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't believe there is, Senator.
Okay, so that's the new policy. That's good. And
No,
so
Senator, I think
was
that's
the
the
ARC
existing policy.
advised, for instance, by your minister to monitor the connections in any particular jurisdictions or any institutions?
No,
I
Senator.
don't believe so, Senator.
So there's been no advice from the minister's office or?
Senator, the ARC has always scanned for sensitivities.
Yes, I understand that. But I'm just saying in regard to the actions that's taken the day after the material appeared in the Australian, but I might add, but not the material that appeared in the Telegraph, and I don't think you have explained why you didn't act on the Telegraph material. Perhaps now you can tell me, why didn't you act on it then?
I have no idea, Senator. We need to take
can't
that on
say.
You don't know?
I can come back on notice.
You'll take that on notice,
Yes.
huh? So it wasn't because the minister asked you to act?
No, it's a
Thank
standard
you.
process of the ARC.
So you acted on your own
Yes.
advice? Huh?
As we would in relation to
Okay.
any allegations in relation to researchers funded by the ARC.
So you've acted on the basis that you say you're required at law to do this?
Senator, we're managing Commonwealth funds. If we become aware that something adverse is out there, we want to give the administering institution an opportunity to respond.
And this information, where's it going to that you're seeking, additional information? Is it going back to the minister's office?
It will come to us.
Is it secure in your office?
We manage a range of sensitive information, and this will be managed in the same way.
It's available to other agencies within government?
We have not provided it to other parts of government.
But it is available, isn't it?
Well, if they made a request, then the ARC would manage that information in accordance with the
You're
Privacy
obliged to
Act and
provide
what
it, wouldn't
those obligations are.
Yes, you're obliged to provide it, aren't you?
I'm
We
not
need to
sure
take-
that's clear.
Yes, Senator.
Sorry, you're not clear?
We're not clear, sorry.
Would you like to take that on notice?
Absolutely.
And is it the case that it's available to the minister?
No.
It's not.
Senator, this is correspondence to the ARC.
In relation to a grant which has been previously given.
So from last year, you started to collect information about the country and date of birth of applicants. That's correct, isn't it? The first time you sought that information?
Yes, that sounds right.
That's part of your research management system?
Yes, Senator.
I see. Do you follow up any foreign associations or affiliations of the applicant in receipt of grants, even if they're Australian citizens?
Senator, we'll follow up on allegations or things that come to light. But it's not about a particular country, it's across everyone.
It's not, yes, it's not a specific country, is it? See, so it's not illegal to be involved in the fellowship programs, for instance, of other countries, is it?
No, it's not, Senator.
It's not. In fact, the head of ASIO made that point the other day. You would
Yes.
have noticed those remarks.
Yes.
So it's not about any specific country.
No, it's country agnostic.
I see, yes. How many of your applicants have advised of foreign associations or affiliations as a subset of the applicants that have advised in the latest round, 2020 round?
So, Senator, the additional questions in relation to country of birth and date of birth were for applications in 2019, for the latter half of the 2019 period, which have just been going through assessment at the moment. Oh, sorry, have already been assessed.
So you'll be able to provide that information for me for 2019, and you've
Well,
got...
that would only be in relation to country of birth.
Yeah.
So the new questions have only come into place since September 2020. So we wouldn't have any information at this stage on those affiliations.
So
from applicants.
the 2020 round there's no changes yet, because that's not actually been implemented formally, has it?
The 2020 round has opened.
Open, but has it been implemented?
The rounds which opened in 2020 have those new questions in there.
When do they close?
Over a variety of dates. So there'll be some that close later this year and then some into next year.
Are you able to provide a clear statement for applicants on the explanation of the purpose of seeking the information about foreign associations and affiliations, and an explanation of how this will be used in the decision-making process?
I think we've already done that, Senator. Yeah.
Where can I find that?
I believe that's on our website.
Yeah, there was
Sorry?
There was a network message at the time of the...
Sorry? A network message?
A network message which was...
To research.
So you
to
want to make
research.
us a copy of that?
We certainly can, Senator.
Thank you. And will that go to the issue of whether or not the minister chooses to agree to a grant being provided?
No, Senator, it goes to the purpose of why we are collecting the information.
Yes.
From memory.
But will that information go to the issue of ministerial approval of grants?
The minister, as decision maker, can take into account any information he chooses, but
Yes.
at this point, the ARC has generically advised of sensitivities, and what we seek to do is to be able to also advise on how those sensitivities are mitigated.
Is it the case that this information will be provided to the minister?
Not at this point, Senator, no.
So at what point will it be?
Well,
Senator, if I can just go back, I suppose, to the purpose for why we are collecting this information. It is to provide, in the first instance, the first phase would be for institutions to understand what affiliations that researchers have prior to making an application to the ARC. That will support institutions' information on the guidelines to counter foreign interference in Australian universities. Once that goes through that first phase or first pass from institutions and Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Researchers are satisfied that it is an appropriate application for all the reasons about it's a quality application, it has the right level of partners in there, it has the right level of chief investigators, it would then, once it comes to the ARC will also then undertake a second phase of due diligence in relation to those applications to identify whether there may be any issues or not. If it identifies that there are issues, then it would then seek further advice from institutions.
And that's been in the case in the management of conflicts of interest at universities for some time, has it not?
yes, the process has. The declarations have just become broader.
And I'm trying to establish what is it that has led to that change other than ASPE's report and these statements, such as the Chinese great science swindle, which are contained within them statements to the effect that no claim is actually made against the scholars concerned.
So Senator,
You did note that, didn't you?
Senator, if I can just go back to, and I think the Director General from ASIO also provided this evidence last week, which was that it was working around the with the Australian Research Council to improve its management of issues around foreign interference and foreign influence. And it has been assisting the ARC over the last 2 years to do that, to increase our level of due diligence.
And have you been able to establish, I repeat the question, any breaches of the Defence Control Export Act or any of the associated regulations associated with the very rigorous regulations that concern those relationships with international collaborations?
Not at this stage, Senator.
What do you mean
no.
not at this stage?
Not to date.
Not to date, not to your knowledge. See, this is the point. I've asked this question now for some years, and you've never been able to point to any example where there have been a breach of the law or the regulations. I've asked you a question in relation to the operations according to the Australian National Audit Office, and there's been no difficulty associated with your administration of those grants in terms of conflict of interest or foreign interference of any of those misdemeanours that people talk of. I'm trying to use the word gently, because the claims made in these reports are actually horrendous, but there's no evidence presented, or in your own reports in regard to your responsibilities to report breaches to the Finance Department. No evidence whatsoever. Now, other than this tracker funded by the US government, what have you got?
Senator, I don't do the scans myself. I would need to take that on notice. We use a number of different sites.
So what's required these days is for someone to make an innuendo or a claim regarding an applicant or a recipient of a laureate fellow, and you'll run an investigation. But when will you put out the statement to exonerate these people? Have you put out any to date?
Well, Senator, if we are satisfied with the advice that has come back from the institution, that is the end of the matter, and our relationship is in relation to.
It's not for these professors. They're the ones with the death threats, the rape threats. It's not the end of the matter for them. The question is, what are you doing to defend their reputations?
So, Senator, that would be the role of the institution, because they are the employer of the researchers in question.
What is your responsibility to defend the integrity of our research system and our scholars?
Senator, I think that's what we are doing, though. The question is, do we find no breaches because we ask no questions, or because we ask questions and we get assurance that things are being managed appropriately?
Professor, I've been asking you these questions for 3 or 4 years. 3 or 4 years. This has been a campaign run by certain elements of the security establishment in this country. The Defence Department has issued statement after statement rejecting the claims that have been made about university research. You've had plenty of time to actually establish whether or not there's any basis to the claims. Now, throughout that period, you have consistently told me that you have no evidence of any breaches of the law or any regulations. I'm just wondering, what does it take for you to actually come forward and actually defend our scholars?
Senator, we undertake contacts with institutions, and we do that in an appropriately measured way, yes, rather than an out there sort of way.
Measured, right.
Senator Carr, if you don't mind, Senator Davey. Yeah.
Just, if you don't mind, Senator Carr, but it's directly relevant to what you're saying and implying is, I understand Senator Carr's concerns about when investigations are taking place and the implications on the good reputation of professors, but does the ARC go out and proactively put out press releases when they are asking questions, or is that information, is it the ARC, do you go out and put out a press release proactively that you are undertaking an investigation?
No, we don't.
So if that information gets into the public domain, it's not through the ARC?
Yes, we will be respectful as we proceed to investigation, because we don't know the truthfulness or otherwise of the allegations that are made.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that, Senator Carr, because I agree
Professor
with
Davies,
you that
this has been slammed across the front pages of newspapers for a great while.
Yeah.
Run through the ABC for a great while. You know, I'm waiting for the ARC to do its job. Now, in this particular case, Professor Edward Holmes, I want to table this, Mr Chairman, in regard to the New South Wales Scientist of the Year. Right? And he's a man that has been subject to this vilification. You've had plenty of time. It is a strange thing that the New South Wales government doesn't seem to have any problem honouring what is a laureate fellow, a laureate fellow. I want to emphasise how important that is. But the ARC can't actually say anything positive to defend one of our leading international scholars. And I just can't understand, what does it take? But, a Liberal government in New South Wales doesn't seem to have any trouble doing it.
Senator, I don't think that ARC can be held responsible for what's published in newspapers.
Yes, you can.
No, they can't.
Look,
They're not responsible for what's published in newspapers.
But I don't want to get into a side argument about how material gets into newspapers, but when it is in the newspapers attacking the ARC, it attacks you, funding these scholars. The Telegraph article specifically attacked the ARC. You did nothing about it. When I asked you questions about the situation in regard to Professor Hoy, where we had problems finding the correspondence, my concern is the ARC has been extremely slow in defending our scholars, and you've actually got a good record in terms of the way in which grants are administered in this country. Very good record in terms of those conflicts, managing those conflicts of interest issues. And I just cannot follow why you don't actually defend our international scholars in the same vein. I finish my questions. Thank you very much. The rest of my questions I'll put on notice, given the hour.
Senator Carr, if you finished your questions, there are no questions from the government. That is the best news I've heard for a long time. So I'd like to thank you, Professor Thomas, and fellow officers of the Australian Research Council for coming along. You are free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary, for coming also. Thank you, Minister, for all that you've done in the time that you've been here, and Minister Birmingham. So, I mean that sincerely, actually. So this does conclude today's proceedings. The committee is due to recommence its examination of the budget estimates on Thursday, 29th of October. Thank you to Hansard Broadcast, Secretariat, everybody. Everybody should be thanked. And she was all thanked. Please turn it off now. Thank you. Goodbye.